Curran, your host for the Environmental Sensitivities Symposium, a world-first event. And today I have the pleasure of introducing you to Deanna Minich. Now, Deanna, what is the work that you do?
So I do what's called Food and Spirit. Food and Spirit is an educational platform where we look at the psychology and the physiology of health, and we bring them together into one integrated whole. So I do lots of speaking, lecturing, educating around this to health professionals and to people that want to learn more about this for themselves.
And how is it that you came to do this work? What's your journey here?
Yeah, well, I also am very keen on the whole area of detoxification. And if you were to ask me, how did you come to this whole area of looking at environmental sensitivities and detox, I would definitely say that, it's been quite a journey in the way of looking at the things that have changed my personal health. So having and struggling with a number of food intolerances, skin issues, gut issues, and trying to find my own path, what I ended up doing for myself is exploring a variety of different modalities. And when I went into clinical practice, also finding that there were certain things that helped other people to get well, and they involved in some way or another releasing a number of these toxicities.
It's interesting, too, that you're talking about bringing that spiritual side into it, because there's that interrelationship between the spiritual side, our physical selves, what we do, and all the rest of it. Could you talk us through a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I've noticed that when I would take people through detox programs, they would shift in many ways. It wasn't just their body releasing toxins and mercury levels going down. They were shifting emotionally, they were changing how they were thinking, and they were even changing their connection to more of their spiritual life. And I think, just growing up as I have, and again, I'm going to take it into my own personal experience because that's what I know the most, what I have noticed for myself is I grew up with a lot of beliefs around my spiritual self that perhaps were not completely serving. A lot of punishment and reward types of ways of thinking about my spirituality, which was essentially a religious system of believing in certain things. So I think sometimes we have beliefs that we don't realize aren't really lifting us to our full potential, and they might be holding us back. So when we do a detox, it's worthwhile to be looking at every single little thing around us, in our environment, in our internal sphere, as well as our external sphere. And so spirituality, I think, is a big piece of that because we are physical and we are non-physical. So I do think that acknowledging that piece in a detox or when we're trying to get clean in our body, mind, and spirit makes a lot of sense.
It sure does, and it's much more than a complete transformation.
It is, yeah, absolutely. And, there's this quote in traditional Chinese medicine, as above, so below, as within, so without, that essentially our spiritual views, the way that we see our connection with the universe and with something greater, is reflected in our internal physiology and who we are in this little microcosm in our physical world that we operate within. So it's really all the same thing, and it's all very interconnected like a web. And I think it's hard to really separate and just say, okay, I'm going to work on my spiritual toxins now, or I'm just going to work on my physical levels of heavy metals or my environmental exposures. I think when we touch the web of who we are in one way, it ripples through our whole being. And so it's just part of who we are.
Fascinating. And there's something, because I participated in your detox summit and also the detox challenge, and I know one of the comments that you made was that it was, and this is the sort of belief that you sort of grow up with and you realize that it's not really, I guess, serving, but on a different level, but something you'd been taught as a young person, that all the foods that were white were not nutritious.
You have such a good memory. Yeah. When so I grew up with a health nut mom and a junk food dad. kind of both ends of the spectrum. And so I got a taste of both worlds. And I also grew up Catholic. And so there was this belief system. I went to Catholic school, and I had very strict nuns and priests around me all the time. And it was always that I was, we were sinning and we had to go to confession. And at the same time that my mom really got into her faith, she also got into food. So we created this very, the sense of purity, the sense of constriction around food. And I can remember that it was a very traumatic experience for me because I was quite young when my mom went through her own inner transformation. She was pregnant with my brother. I was 9 years old. She went through this food and faith, I would call it a revelation. All of a sudden she started going to church every day, and at the same time we started eating all of these strange foods. I was used to eating other types of foods, and all of a sudden we're eating vegetables. She's making homemade bread. She's making things from scratch. We're buying different types of products that don't taste as good to me. And so this is very traumatic. And so for me, I wanted to be accepted at school, and I had different foods. And so my mom would say, just tell the kids that the whiter the bread, the quicker they're dead. That there's a sense of white foods, white flour, white sugar, white salt, that these types of things are bad for us, and that in some way they're aligning with us not being pure in body.
Because there's so many white foods that are good for us, and I know one of the
it's true.
Yeah, and coconut at the moment is like such a big thing. Coconut oil and coconut milk and coconut everything. And
garlic and onions and cauliflower. I mean, it doesn't stop, really. But, yes, I think it's the granulated, refined white products, if we could, really look at that a little bit closer.
Absolutely. And I know one of the things that you like to incorporate with the work that you do is about the rainbows in our food.
Yes. Yeah, I'm really tuned into color. So, Lucinda, you and I were just talking about people that are visual, and I'm one of those people. I like to see things, even as I'm being taught something, I like to see it in front of me, and I think that many people are like that. And so what do we see on our plates? What are the colors that we're tapping into? Because we're actually feeding ourselves on a different level. We're feeding ourselves at the level of the senses, not just the tongue and what's coming in, but also the sights. I mean, just think about when we go grocery shopping. If we're in the store, we're in the farmer's market, wherever we are selecting food, the primary way that we select food, if we're in the produce section, is primarily through our eyes. We're looking at what looks good, what colors are most vibrant. We're looking for rotten spots on the food versus foods that aren't rotten. And so we are using our eyes to a great degree. So I do like to have people focus on colors on the plate because it's something that everybody can understand. Children can understand it, adults and older people. We all connect to that sense of our sight if we have sight. So I do think it's important to connect to that. And I look at the physiology of those colored foods as well as the psychology. I do think that each of those colors represents something that goes beyond just phytonutrients in the food. There's also a resonance to what it stands for symbolically.
I know once I sort of started thinking about foods on my plate too and making sure I had my rainbow, all of a sudden the plate got much more colourful and much more interesting. And then even just being in awe of the beauty of what nature provides.
Yes.
It's
it can even be the plates that we choose. I remember talking with a variety of different patients about their kitchen. And many people's kitchens are white. They're sterile. They're cold. They're not warm and inviting and colorful. And even the plates that we might eat on, what colors? I know some months ago, or even some years ago, I remember I first did this, where I went to the store and I bought a series of rainbow-colored plates. And then I got further and I went into rainbow-colored cups and glasses. And, just almost how am I feeling and how am I eating, and bringing it through not even just to the food colors, but to everything that surrounded that eating experience. And so I've even created a deck of cards called Nourish Your Whole Self cards, which are all rainbows. So like you pick a card and it's connected to a color, connected to a phrase. And I just think that we're constantly getting these messages. You know, you're focused on environmental sensitivities. Everything in our environment is giving us some type of message that we're sensitive to. You know, what are the images that we surround ourselves with? Are we surrounded in clutter? Are we surrounded with books? Are we surrounded in newspaper articles? Are we surrounded with trash? Are we surrounded with very minimalistic surroundings? You know, everything around us is feeding us on that intellectual and intuitive level. And even within Jungian psychology, we think of archetypes. What are the archetypes that we see in the environment? What are the symbols that we have around us that might be toxic? So I think it's important to consider the many layers that we might be exposed to.
It's great advice. And so tell us too, why are you so passionate about the work that you do?
Because I have seen that people are craving and searching for ways to get well. And being that I have come from a place of me going through my own health issues, and even the family that I come from, my parents both come from large families that were riddled with chronic illnesses. I mean, people dying very young of cancer, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. And now I look back, and I think that the one person that affected me the most was my grandmother, my father's mother. And when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, I watched her go through bone and breast cancer. And I was very close to her, and the whole experience was very painful to me emotionally because she was in a lot of pain. And I kept thinking to myself, there's a way for her to get better, but I just felt like there was nothing I can do. I was a preteen, I was small, I didn't have access to resources, but I just intuited that there could be something here that could be done. And I told myself, I made this secret promise to myself that I would do something to help people with getting well. I never knew what it would look like, but eventually here I am, and I do feel passionate about it. In fact, sometimes I feel like a nutrition preacher because I feel so impassioned, and once you're on the side of feeling good, there's no going back. You don't even want to partake in eating certain foods because you just know how it's going to make you feel. And I really want people to see that and feel that and know that that's available to them. So that's why I'm so passionate about the work, because I'm really wanting people to have that sense of knowing, of feeling, and being in that realm of wellness as much as they can.
That is such a beautiful story, and I do think those promises we make when we're so young are so life-changing, aren't they? Like, it really sets your path.
Yes.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to share that story, and I think that we all have stories like that, right? You know, we're not unique in that we've never experienced sickness or illness. We all have in some way, whether a friend or a family member or ourselves. So I feel like we all do tap into that. We all know that there can be something that we can experience that will help us heal, and that can come on many different levels. So, yeah, thanks for allowing me the space to share that story.
And everybody, Dr. Deanna Minich will be a speaker at the Environmental Sensitivities Symposium, and you can find out more at environmentalsensitivities-symposium.com.